Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry De Silva. Well, it's always a pleasure when we have guests stop back, visit us, whether it's via satellite or in studio or on the phone. It's always good when they come back with new adventures, new projects. Well, we have just a gentleman that fits that very well. Rich Appel, you may know him from the syndicated radio show That Thing with Rich Appel, which airs on over 100 stations worldwide. Rich, of course, has over 30 years of experience in radio and music as an air personality, radio and records consultant, Billboard editor and columnist, book author, as well as a research director for Sony Music. So very busy man. And we've got our little trusty kind of, well, modern antique radio, and we're going to play a little snippet from That Thing with Rich Appel. Let's see if I can get this thing to work.
Well, Rich Appel is waiting in the wings.
You get a quicker time, a double time when you use QT.
Hi, welcome to our show.
And now, here it is, whatever it is.
That Thing with Rich Appel, Planet Earth.
Kicking off all summer songs, all summer long. Turn the key, lower the windows, and let this blast.
That Thing with Rich Appel.
Well, that gives you a little sampling. If you haven't already caught Rich's show, well, believe me, it's always a pleasure. I know I ran across it myself on one of his many syndicated stations even before I met the man, and then I said, I have to get this guy on the show. Well, now not only has he been on the show, he's back again on Studio 411. Rich, welcome back to the show.
Larry, thank you. It is a terrific, it's always a pleasure to be here. And I'm really excited to learn how well these flowers are doing. I was here when?
Yes.
Was it 2017,
Yeah.
2016? And here we are 2 years
I don't know.
later, and they're still so
what's this here?
Oh, that's my sneaky. That was my sneaky way. I was planning that
Oh.
in here. That was my cheat sheet. I
Oh,
figured
your
if,
cheat
if
sheet.
Buddy Hackett can do it on the
There
Tonight
you go.
Show, I can do it on
Okay,
this show.
I thought maybe that was like sent to us from a guest or something.
Maybe it was growing a different kind of leaf. I don't know, but I thought it had a nice effect to it. So
That Thing with Rich Appel, top 40 music like it was and never was. So again, I love listening to the program. I learn things that, believe it or not, my wife says to me, "You didn't know that?" So fill the audience in again on that wonderful show right here. See, it's even taken over where my logo usually is. That thing.
Like that. I think that logo. It gives me a lot to live up to.
Yeah.
But it's,
So tell me, give the viewers a little kind of verbal background on the show and how long. Well, you've been doing it since when?
this whole mess started in 2014, and here we are almost 5 years later, and 5 years and 100 stations later, with a show that the intention was to just do something different, but do something that harkened back to what the classic era of top 40 radio sounded like. And it's not like that has really gone away. We still have top 40, but it's a little bit different now. It's a little bit more controlled. Back then it was, I think, more out of control. In that era, the DJ could talk a lot more than he or she can do today. You can be clever right up to the beginning of the vocal of the song and right out of the vocal of the song near the fade. We don't even have fades in songs today, I don't believe. That's a dying breed.
But it's in this era we live in where everything seems to be ultra controlled, or you have to be careful because if you offend one person, I mean, I don't mean something that is truly offensive. I mean just something that would be misconstrued, or you talk too much, or don't talk talk more, or don't talk over the song. Well, talk. I mean, it really is. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I think over the weekend, I heard the same song. It was it was Broken Dreams by Mr. Mister. Do I have the correct
Broken
song?
Wings.
Broken Wings. Right. Well, it might have been a Broken Dreams for me on the weekend, but anyway, but it's Broken Wings.
There is a Broken Dreams song too, but if you don't want to go there, we won't go there.
But anyway, this was Mr. Mister, circa like 1985, 86.
That's exactly when it was.
I
Get some
kid you
points
not.
for that,
Yeah, the
man.
other one was Kyrie, which was a better song. You remember that
Right,
one?
Kyrie
Yeah,
Liaison
yeah,
down the
exactly.
road. I did what did I do on that one? See, now I have to remember. I did some kind of an awful pun with that when I played it the last time, and I'm gonna have to go back and figure out what that was now.
But I was driving from the Boston area through Rhode Island back up into Connecticut, and I kid you not, in that 3-hour drive with a couple of stops, I heard that song on 3 different stations, 3 times in a leisurely summer drive.
And one of them was an all-news station. Go figure. Because that's the way. That's the quote.
But that's what it
nature.
is. You know, the joke is it's like the I don't even want to say the top 100 because first of all, I wouldn't even put that in the top 500. A nice song as that it is, but it's what you were saying about the control that goes on. I mean, 3 times. Yet I had gone to a Stones concert, that night before, and I didn't hear one Stones song. So what's up with that?
At the concert, you must have heard them. What did the Stones
I heard
sing?
it, yeah, but no.
Did the Stones go up there and sing "Broken Wings"?
Maybe.
How would that have
they
been?
They did a couple of blues tunes, but that's for another show. But yeah, that's what I think we're getting at is just the creativity that you bring with your show is like leaps and bounds over like what even I get to do in radio these days or that others do. It's very controlled.
Larry, I'll tell you, one of the reasons or one of the ways this show came to be was because of that repetition and because of those tight playlists. The last commercial radio job I had before that thing began was at a station where I was doing Saturday mornings, and my real job was just to sit there and make sure the automation was working and jump in and talk every now and then. And, don't be a pest. Just, we'll pay you $7 an hour. That's what I made. And I started realizing as I was looking through, and I'm saying, you know what? These songs, and they're all songs that get played all the time, like Broken Wings, like Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, or John Mellencamp's Hurt So Good, or the Summer of '69 by Brian, or any of these songs that are in a high rotation on a classic hit station. And I thought to myself, these songs would sound so much better if you brought something, if the host brought something to the table that made people want to listen to them again, or if they didn't like them, they would at least sit through them because maybe you said something that made them more interesting. So I started to get the schedule, because they used to schedule all the automation like 3 weeks in advance. So I had the program director. I actually figured out in the computer where all the automation was. I would print off here's next week's show, here's the next week's show, and I would just start writing material around all these songs. And I noticed when I started doing that people started calling. I started the show. No one used to call. The phones were dead. But then I would start making these silly one-liners, or I would relate them to things happening now, and the phones would ring. And people would say, hey, that was funny. Or, hey, that was not funny, which is still good because they're listening.
At least they're paying attention.
And so that's kind of how that thing was born, because now what we're doing is kind of an offshoot of that. A lot of the material, as some listeners, if you listen, and thank you if you do, if you're listening to the show, you know that a lot of the material is what I call date-driven. So it's not a show you can just plant in any day of any week. There are a lot of syndicated shows that the hosts record about 10 of them ahead of time, and you just, whatever airs, airs. So they're airing, you're hearing Brown Eyed Girl and Brandy, You're a Fine Girl in just some rotation, and the host isn't acknowledging what day it is. Whereas on this show, because it's going to be, August the 16th or October the 10th, that weekend when the show is airing, I'm looking at, what happened in history? Whose birthday is October the 10th, et cetera? What's the anniversary of? What state entered the Union? What happened? Are there holidays? Are there crazy holidays? Because every weekend has crazy holidays. Mm-hmm. So I would take that and I work backwards. Instead of having a list of songs, I choose the songs based on what's happening every weekend, and that's what I talk up.
Yeah.
In a matter of fact,
but you're able to do that, whereas most stations, again, today, there are several things. There is no live host, okay? In other words, it's canned, or the songs are picked and it's very stringent, which, again, I understand. They're trying to fill a certain format. But, again, the days of request, you take requests. Now, they may not make it until the following week, but at least you do offer via the age of technology. They can call and leave a request or a comment
Absolutely.
or whatever, as well as send something to thatthingshow.com or any other.
we have a hit line. We
have a
have
hit line.
1-833 that thing,
Yeah.
where people can call and leave their voices, and I'll insert that into the program and with their song and so forth, because you want to be interactive as well.
Yeah.
It's not all about me, but well, maybe it is. But no, seriously, it's
There's no ego there.
But what I was trying to say is that it's about what we create. We want to make sure the show stands out. This is really all about zigging when everybody else is zagging. We want to make it so when someone tunes in for these 3 hours on the weekend, they know they're going to get something they can't get from anywhere else or any other radio program that plays these songs from this era. They'll hear the songs that they hopefully like. Maybe they'll hear a few songs they don't normally hear that will sneak in. But if it works with the particular event or birthday or anniversary or holiday, then that's great. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have a few examples of intros or outros where I've tried to do that sort of thing. So if you want to,
and we'll go check that out. So let's listen up and some samples from some of Rich's shows. All right, and then we'll be back here on Studio 411.
This week in England, in the year 1215, King Johnny be good and sign the Magna Carta. I was thinking, which is always a dangerous thing, if a former U.S. president had done that, he'd have called it the Magna Carta. The current president would want to sign a MAGA Carta, or knowing him, the MAGA Carta. Oh, and when Clint Eastwood was mayor of Carmel, California, he'd have signed a Magnum Carta.
Aren't you finished yet?
Oh, I was finished years ago.
A tornado!
All right, we are back with Rich Appel, and host and creator of That Thing with Rich Appel. For more information, thatthingshow.com. We've got some sample quotes here from some folks, either listeners or some of the executives throughout the many affiliates that you have. The best, and notice the word thing is very critical here, the best thing that to ever happen to weekends, I would agree with that, because when I stumbled on it on a local station, and I'm, again, I consider myself a pretty sharp guy. I've got the frequencies for 3 states that air your show, both AM and FM. So if I'm traveling, let's say like this past weekend when I was on the road from Connecticut, Rhode Island, Mass, Long Island, I don't know where you are there, but all of a sudden I'm literally going, the signal fades, go to the next one. The signal fades, go to go to AM, go to FM. I mean, it's great. You're like flies on a piece of honey.
We're lucky when that happens. I am actually on, I think, 3 different stations on Long Island. So wherever you happen to be driving, one goes out, one goes in. Same situation.
Yeah.
Kind of like in North Carolina. We're on a bunch of stations in North Carolina. I think if you're lucky, if you're driving in the right direction, you'll have the similar experience.
I was going to ask, and if the answer is no, at least maybe it'll put an idea in your head. Is there any thought about doing a That Thing app where then someone could just have that on their phone and listen to the station anytime they want?
There is now.
There is. Oh.
No, I never, honestly, I never thought of it. But we try to get close to that with the page on the website where you can see for every weekend, for every day and time, okay, at Friday at 7, we're on this station, click on it, listen, etc. So that's one way to go.
There you go.
We haven't gotten into the app age yet, but hopefully one of these days.
One thing, and I forget if we talked about it when you were here the last time, one of the ones that I remember that stuck in my head, because I'm driving along and I'm saying, wow, this is this is pretty intense in that, you know, it's kind of a subject matter that I don't know if I would do, but you do a segment. I hope you still do it because I thought it was very, very good, where you take I guess a topic. In this case, it was stuttering.
That's right.
And you did the thing where it was like My Generation from The Who. I don't know. I want to
You
say
Ain't Seen Nothing Yet.
yes, by BTO.
But Benny and the Jets.
Exactly.
Elton
Was there a
John, and so
Tommy
forth.
James song in there? I don't even remember.
I don't believe there is, but I was amazed at how many there were. We got an hour's worth of songs that with stuttering.
And I thought to myself, you know, again, it's like everything else in this hypersensitive world we live in. I thought, I get where he's going with it, but then you're going to have someone who either, you know, does have that, you know, real affliction, or someone who's family, you know, member or whatever, and they're going to say, look at that, and you know, like mocking them, and that's not the case at all. It was
well. Do you happen to recall why we did that segment? Because, as I mentioned, most of the time, if not all, even these special features, a theme hour, is also date driven.
It was probably like National Stuttering Week or something like something. No, I mean something where it was a good cause.
I guess it sounds. I mean, that sounds like an interesting concept. Actually, it was the birthday of Colin Firth. See, I can't even say Colin Firth, the actor from The King's Speech. You know, who was a stutterer in that movie. But regarding what you said earlier about, well, am I afraid I'm going to offend someone? I made certain that wasn't the case, but I kind of turned the tables on myself. And I think I also mentioned this several times in that hour, and maybe you'll recall it. I was a stutterer.
Right.
And in some cases, I still am a stutterer.
He just gave us an example of that
That's
about
right, I couldn't
30
say Colin
seconds ago. But my
Colin
point is
Firth.
that in
I'll never say Colin Firth again.
The one person who is going to
I apologize if
There
you're
you go.
watching Colin
There you
Firth.
go. The one person who's going to complain is going to be the one who never heard you say that I also had or have on occasion that affliction or whatever the topic may be, you know. And so I don't bring it up to say, we gotta go after this guy. No, I just thought it was a well done hour, and the music was great. And then I listened and I said, boy, he's absolutely right. Every one of those songs has something that you would associate with a stammer or a stutter. That's all.
And to thread the needle, if you will,
Sure.
and I hate that phrase, by the way, but it was the first one that came to mind. The name of that segment on the program, usually we do it in game form, and it's called What's Going On, as in the Marvin Gaye song.
There you go.
So we'll play a series of songs for one of the segments, so maybe 7 songs, and they're all meant to be clues for the listeners to guess what is going on with all those songs. What's that commonality? What's the glue that's holding them all together? And we've done some crazy ones. I know we've done this for a couple of years now, and they're usually, again, all things that have to do with something that happened on that particular date or one of the weekend dates when the show is.
So it is almost like a today in history or weekend in history, something that would be common knowledge to the masses that you're trying to get them to guess what it is.
Well, we hope it's common.
I mean, do you have one, and not to put you on the spot, but do you have one, like even a truncated one that you could, obviously I don't have the songs to listen to, but that you say, okay, this artist,
Yes.
this artist, and this song. This artist and
Okay.
that song, and then I'm supposed to
It's
guess
coming
what it is.
back to me now. I'm going to see if I can piece it together. But a few months ago, I did one where I began with, it was a Rolling Stones song, and I think it might have been Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Okay.
And then I followed that with another Rolling Stones song, which was their remake of Ain't Too Proud to
Okay.
Beg, followed by, I want to say it was Simply Red's Holding Back the Years, and then I think there was a Bad Company song in there, probably Can't Get Enough, and we also had the biggest hit for Tony Basil, if you remember who Tony
Mickey?
Basil was. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you figure it out yet? I think I may have. That was kind of the giveaway. And there's also, let me see. Now, see, this is where I consult my little hidden piece
Yeah.
of paper in the plant.
I thought it was a note from a viewer.
No, here it is. I wish it was. Okay, what? No, they're not there.
So Jumpin' Jack Flash, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Holding Back the Years, Can't Get Enough, and the song by Tony Basil.
Oh, also, there was one by the Kinks. I'm not sure. It might have been Tired of Waiting for You. Basically, in many of these cases, except for the Tony Basil song, the songs themselves don't matter. Actually, the songs for the two Stones songs do matter, and you'll see why when I explain it. Should I spill the beans, as I usually say on the program?
Give me a hint.
A hint.
Is it animal, vegetable, or mineral?
Oh, also there was. We also had the Morning After. The thoughts from the Poseidon
Maureen
Adventure.
McGovern, yeah.
Right, and also what was the other one? Torn Between Two Lovers was on there. Remember who sang that?
yeah.
Her one hit. That was Mary McGregor. So
Torn.
and I believe I want to say this wasn't. I'm not gonna. It wasn't St. Patrick's Day, but there was another reason. Oh, I think there might have been one of those silly holidays. I'm pretty sure it wasn't St. Patrick's Day, but it could have. It probably, if I did it for St. Patrick's Day, it might have been looked at as patently offensive. But it works for the holiday, whatever it was. I have to look it up now.
Wow, I was
me to
going to
tell
say,
you?
yeah, what was it?
Every song has a Mick in it. I mean, you have Mickey, of course, with
Okay.
Tony Basil, and the two Stone songs are because you have one for Mick Jagger, and the one with Ain't Too Proud to Beg was when Mick Taylor was in the
Okay,
group.
gotcha.
Mick Ralphs was in Bad Company. The lead singer of Simply Red is Mick Hucknall. Mary McGregor, it could be a Mick in that way.
Yeah.
We had Paul McCartney, which I hadn't gotten to. I think it's Mick Avery, who's in the Kinks. So that
Okay,
was
wow,
that was one of them. That was a tougher one. And I think it was National Mick Day, if I'm not mistaken, because it's holidays for everything.
But again,
that's why that was it.
these songs alone, I mean, again, here you go. You've got a variety from basically 60s, 70s, right up through the end of the 80s. And again, if nothing else, you're sitting there or driving along and saying, hey, I'm enjoying the heck out of this show. And
Well, I
next
hope
thing you
so.
know it, and at the same time, you kind of can play along.
I wish every listener was like you, Larry.
I'm telling you, I remember it like it was yesterday when I heard your show, and all of a sudden I turned to my wife in the car and I said, this is amazing because it's a throwback, and we talked about this either off air or whatever. Your show is, yes, there you go, the invitation back there. I love hearing the old.
They're going to give you at the wedding.
There you
Can I
go.
take this home with me? What's the number underneath here? Oh, it's 6. All right.
Don't eat the grapes; they'll make you sick.
Is the water going to spill out if I turn this
Yes.
over?
You get to hear shows like, Wolfman Jack, Dick Clark, Casey Kasem. It's great because, folks, middle-aged folks and older, kind of have a connection with those guys. And then I sit back and I say, my God, Wolfman's been going like for over a quarter century. And then when his show comes on, if I catch it on a various station or online, you just say, wow, and you listen to it and it sounds as fresh, although he probably couldn't get away with half the stuff that he did on that show today. It's kind of because it's a historical piece. They probably
You know what?
allow
I
it.
don't think any of them could, because the bar has been raised in so many ways in terms of being careful. There's just the way people were referred to in terms of their ethnicity, or how women were regarded as opposed to men. You listen back to any of these shows, and you're right. Just the way we were talked about, how the references to drugs, to sex. There's a lot of lines. As you said before, there's so many lines today.
Well, even
you
like
really
Wolfman
can't
used to
cross.
do a thing that goes back to even when he was in American Graffiti, where he would have like a kid on the line or a female, and then the banter that would go on. Again, I find it very comical because I know how to take it. But again, if that was being aired live today, it was another gentleman. He was out of Washington and then later New York. He was called the Grease Man.
Of course.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time here in Connecticut.
Yes, yeah.
right?
And again, his shtick was to the point where even in the mid-'90s, he wound up actually, I believe, it was taken off because he was starting to be syndicated. Because why? Because, people figure, well, we've got Howard Stern, but now this guy is it's hard for me to even believe I'm saying this, well, as crossing the line. Well, if Howard didn't already eradicate the line, I don't know how the grease man could have been crossing the line. But that's when I could start to hear and see that radio was changing, and not necessarily in a good way.
Well, in defense of Howard, the grease man, Don Imus, so many of these performers, what made them great, if sometimes offensive, or what makes them great, because Howard still does this, of course, is they're all fabulous storytellers. And that's the key to great radio. Because if you tell a story on the radio and you draw listeners in, then you have them, first of all, for more than 1/4 hour, so that's great for the PPM. But that's the challenge to radio hosts like me, because my stories only last about 20 seconds. I've got to talk up the record, and hopefully my story will end with the first line of the song. It's nice when I can say something and that first line finishes the thought and brings you right in, or vice versa, where the song is ending and I can riff off of that. But these are still baby stories. So,
Sure.
So for me, I've got to come up with a lot of those stories every show that I do.
We've got some more samples of Rich's expertise from That Thing with Rich Appel, a 3-hour celebration. Highlights, jingles, commercials, all the hits from the rock and roll 60s through the rockin' and post-disco 80s, along with features. We'll talk about a few in a minute. The slow dance makeout song of the week, or slow-mo as Rich calls them. Needles and Spins, where listeners and Rich tell stories and memories attached to specific songs. A Year in an Hour. That sounds like this show sometimes, but not today. The K-Tel.
Please, not today. We're trying real hard.
The K-Tel Hour and the World's Shortest Countdown. So those are just some. I've got one I want to talk to him about, but first let me get my radio back and let's listen in on some more stuff from That Thing with Rich Appel.
Rich Appel. That Thing with Rich Appel.
For the comedian known for the role he was born to play, himself on TV's Curb Your Enthusiasm, the guy who loved to paint everything black. That's the only color he's ever worn. Happy birthday, Richard Lewis.
Love those clips. Rich Appel, host and creator of That Thing with Rich Appel, syndicated radio host with over 100 radio stations throughout the world. ThatThingShow.com for more information. You do the piece that I love, and I'm happy to say, have worked together on a couple of guests to get for some of these segments. You do the class reunion. The one that comes to mind, I believe it was class reunion, was it 73 or 74? You had our buddy Dennis Dunaway on there, and he contributed.
That's right. It was it would have been last year. Yeah. So let's do some math. Yes, it would have been class of 74, because we did, no, it was actually class of 74 was this year. It would have been class of 73.
Yeah.
Where we got Dennis in to talk about No More Mr. Nice Guy, I think.
Alice Cooper band was, breaking strong in those early 70s, and, again, just loved the little snippets of Dennis, or Burley Drummond, another past guest drummer from a long-running group, Ambrosia, that is going 50 years strong as we speak. Again, nice to hear those people kind of contribute to those segments.
The reunion specials, and we do 3 of them every year in May and June, those might be my favorite part of the program during the year, because of how much interaction we do with the audience. Because invariably, whatever class I'm doing, and this year, what did we do? Because they're all anniversary classes. We did 69, 74, and 79. And invariably, we're always going to find people who graduated during those years, or were in school around that time, and will want to tell us what was going on. And they'll call the hit line, or they'll send us something, they'll email, or they'll find us on social media and leave their memories there. So it's great to intersperse that into the show, and also, if possible, find songs that go really well with their experiences that were hits during those 4 years. Because the other thing that we do, And I know the class reunion idea is, I mean, it's kind of cliche. A lot of radio shows do quote-unquote class reunions, but I never thought they did them right, because usually when they say, oh, class of 1979, they'll just play songs from 1979, which doesn't really capture the experience of being in a 4-year high school or college. When we do class of 79, we begin with freshman year in the fall of 1975, and I know this at the top of my head because that was my college class, 79. And then we run through the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years, spending a lot more time on the senior year, and reviewing what was going on, what we wore, what people drove, what kind of cars they drove, what the fads were, what silly things we did in high school or college or whatever school. Maybe it was grade school for that matter. So we really want to dig deep into that experience for those 4 years and get at not just the music, which if you went to school then of course you think is great, and 9 times out of 10 you'll say, that was the best music ever made when I was in high school or when I was in college.
Now, I've got a curve for you here, and I don't know if anyone's ever brought this up. It's not this way anymore to the best of my knowledge, but the high school that I went to in the town that I was living in at that time, they extended, let's see if I get this right, they extended junior high, so technically junior high was 3 years,
but it was 7th, 8th, and 9th?
7th, 8th, and 9th. So technically, when I went to high school, they've since changed it, I believe, but I could be wrong. Basically, my class reunion show would have only been 3 years.
So then, when you were in 9th grade, you were both a junior and a freshman.
Yeah, in some ways.
Or how did that work? When you entered the high school, you entered as a sophomore. Did you enter as a sophomore /
No, you
freshman?
entered as a sophomore, and you were.
But you were still the youngest one. You might as well have been a freshman.
You were basically pond scum.
Well, of course.
So you only had like.
So you were pond scum at 15 instead of 14.
Yeah, so
what a rip.
Yeah, so you only had like 2.5 years to get your act together.
You had a whole summer to figure it out.
Yeah, your game and everything else, and. Game wasn't too good in those days. College was much better.
Well, I got you beat because in our town, growing up, our junior high, quote unquote junior high, was 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Okay.
So, and it wasn't exclusively. There were some schools in our town. The school that I went to for 5th and 6th was the intermediate school, and then you went to junior high, but the junior high had room for some of the 6th grade classes. So I felt bad for those 6th graders. They had to grow up really fast.
Hey, no matter how they slice it, that first year walking in, I can remember, and I think I told this story once before, even in grade school, I got to show someone a few years ago before it was torn down. As a kid, when you're like in kindergarten or first grade, it would be like walking into the studio as a 5-year-old, and you think, oh my God, it was like the old Letterman show. Letterman's studio, everybody thought it was this massive experience. His set was probably as big as to Rich's left, or your right on as you're watching this, or to my right or the left as we look this way. And then, of course, you had the audience. My school, I went there, many years later, my grade school in another town, and all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute. The blade of grass was about as big as this piece of paper. But, I mean, we thought it was like, humongous. And then, of course, as you see it, and then they tore it down, which I was sad to see. But, again,
Well, Larry, all things considered, the major difference between this set and Letterman's set is about 90 degrees.
Yes, there you go.
It's so hot here. But at Letterman's set, it was like 10 below zero.
Oh yeah, you could be in the upper balcony, and believe me, it was icicle.
I was sitting like in the 4th row, and I had to wear a parka to watch Letterman. But it was a great experience.
Anyone who comes here, doesn't matter whether it's January or June, you're in for a heat bath. Let me tell you that.
Yeah. So if next time I come, I'm just wearing my bathing shorts. That's all.
Rich Appel, host and creator of That Thing with Rich Appel, syndicated on over 100 radio stations worldwide. ThatThingShow.com for more information. Another thing that I love, and this is probably one of my favorites, and I hope I'm not mixing them up. In April, you do a thing, the annual IRS, as in it really should have been a bigger hit?
Actually, we don't do that anymore.
Oh, you don't do that
No,
anymore?
we actually do the Wow 100. That's you're looking actually at you've been actually reading from a lot of things that don't exist on the show anymore.
Oh, this is terrible.
So
We
I
need
just
to bring
thought-
them back. It's like the Pinto. We need to bring it back.
No, we've actually they're bigger and better now. We've actually changed it. The show is now the countdown is now the Wow 100.
But what's the one you do? What's the one that you did in August? And I'll tell you a story. I was up at the Big E.
I don't do anything in August. I'm
No?
on vacation. in
Oh.
August. No, I'm on in August, but I haven't. I never did anything really. I do all summer songs all summer long, which we do in July and August.
Oh, there was that one
And,
that time I was up at the Big E, literally stuck in traffic for an hour and a half to go, about a block and a half. And all of a sudden, this great song by Van Morrison comes up, and I'm like, what song is this? I've never heard it before. And I told you, I don't expect you to remember. It was an up-tempo number, and it was just phenomenal. And this is the kind of things that you do that makes me tune in to that show all the
it's
time.
again probably another example of something that happened to be date-driven. I remember a few weeks ago.
It was beginning
I
of
had a-
September, I beg your pardon, because the Big E held in Springfield is in September.
Well, I know I did last September on Labor Day weekend. We did a special show of all story songs.
No,
So I don't know if that was one of, and we did a special school show where we also included our friend Dennis.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are things that are seasonal. We like the seasonality.
So the IRS one is no more?
Well, no. What we've done is we realized that most people, first of all, can't answer the question. IRS stood for "It Really Should Have Been a Bigger Hit." But if you ask the average person, what do you think really should have been a bigger hit? How would they answer that question? They couldn't.
Yeah.
So we changed it to the Wow 100 and asked the question, well, what
okay.
songs make you go wow when
Yeah.
you hear them?
Oh, no, I got it. I thought it was great.
And we got a lot more input. It was the smartest move we ever made, because now we do a countdown. It's still a 3-weekend-long countdown that reviews what people tell us.
And now
make
it's
them
still
what
in
song-
April, or is
It's still in April. It's like
no,
the
because
first
for me
3
it was
weeks.
as a guy who every year have to pay taxes. Never have I gotten refunds in the
Well,
last
now
15
we ended
years.
in Easter, so we figure,
okay.
or this year it was Eastover, if you want to do it that way, or is it past Easter, or whatever you want to call when the holidays collide. That's when we did it those 3 weekends where number one showed up on Easter Sunday.
Now, how about in December? What do you do for like the holidays?
Well, this past year, we've changed. Every holiday, we've done something different. This past December, for the 2 weekends of Christmas and New Year's, we did the top 100 of top 100s, which was a countdown based on all of the year-end top 100s in all of the countries that we have stations running our show over all the years that we cover on the program. So, for example, I looked at the Netherlands top 100 of 1971 and Canada's top 100 songs of 1969, etc.
You're going to get some that no one's ever heard of. You're going to get like Bruce Coburn and.
Well, actually, when you put them all together and you weight it by the population and the listenership of those countries, it makes sense, because the majority of the songs are things that were big hits in America, but were also big hits over most of the world. So it was a means to play the biggest songs, but to do it from a more international perspective. I think sometimes we here in the United States tend to be, it's only about America.
Yeah.
You know, what about the rest of the world? But when you listen to the music that was popular everywhere else, especially in areas that we get in, like Belgium and Germany and the UK and, I mentioned Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they have fascinating music tastes.
I'll give you an example. And I don't think I learned this from your show. Maybe I did. That it was either 1 or a total of 0. In Great Britain, Three Dog Night, I believe, never had a top 10 song. And I'm like, to me, that's like, I could not believe that statistic when I saw it or read it.
That sounds right, but I'll say an interesting thing. Three Dog Night may have not had a top 10 hit in England, but one of their biggest hits was a top 10 and hit in England by another act a year
It was
before.
Black and White.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was a reggae
That I
hit
think
for
I heard on
a
your
group.
show.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
played the Greyhound
yeah,
version.
yeah.
I played a clip of it and then went into the Three Dog Night
Yeah.
version.
And, you know, I mean, again,
And that was also true for another song, The Show Must Go On, which was a hit for Leo Sayer in England before
really,
Three Dog
I'll
Night covered
have
it.
to look that up. I didn't know.
There's probably a
Yeah.
few instances of that
Because
where
the longer version of The Show Must Go On, it's the Three Dog Night version is a great record. It really is.
yeah, and very underplayed and very
Oh, yeah.
underrated. I've certainly played. I've played probably every hit Three Dog Night ever had. But you know, their whole career was all covers, and a lot of times people know the originals. You know, if you're really savvy, you'll know the original versions of all the songs that Three Dog Night had hits with before they got to them.
Well, the people that were handling them, I'll give credit to like ABC Records at the
Mm-hmm.
time and their producers. I know Richard Polydor was one of their producers.
Pottlore. Polydor was the label. Pottlore was the.
Oh, Pottlore.
You always
My-
confuse
there you go.
Polydor and Pottlore.
Oh, Polydor. Thank you for
Yeah.
correcting
It's
me.
Pottlore.
See, I thought he owned the record too. The record.
I can't
label,
say
too.
Colin Firth, but I
There
can
you
say
go.
Richard Pottlore.
Yeah, there you go. You heard it here first.
We had.
But they were very good at selecting material too.
Yes, they were great at selecting material, and we actually had. Now it's what's his name? The lead singer,
Oh, Chuck Negron.
Chuck
Yeah.
Negron, thank you. Chuck was on our show
Yeah.
a few years ago, and he told us some incredible stories about how those songs came to be and how they made little lyrical tweaks, which is kind of outside of where we usually go on the program. But it was funny because the original opening lyric of Joy to the World was not Jeremiah was a bullfrog. That came out of their session.
Gotcha.
Because Hoyt Axton had something else that Jeremiah was, which escapes me now, and then they kind of riffed and came up with Jeremiah was a bullfrog, and they went, that's it, and there we are.
On that note, with now that song in my head, we're going to check out a couple of more samples of That Thing with Rich Appel. I got my trusty little retro radio here. Let me see if I can pull that in. Let's take a listen.
For the actor who didn't mind going solo, Han Solo, that is, in 4 of the Star Wars movies. Happy birthday, Harrison Ford. If you were in New York City this week in 1977, I hope you had a flashlight. The Appel lost power for 25 hours, including a night of fires, lootings, and a Mets game that went dark in the 6th inning.
Back with Rich Appel, host and creator of That Thing with Rich Appel, thatthingshow.com for more information. Another song before we get off. We could talk music all day and night. A group, I don't know if it was not the Exciters, it was some gentlemen.
The Exciters was Don't Tell Me, Tell Him.
No,
Tell
then
Him
it
that
wasn't.
was a
No, it wasn't them. Then I had that song in my head.
I'm just showing off.
yes,
I know
oh,
you,
yeah.
it wasn't the
No.
song you wanted, but I
The
just...
one of the band members was Eddie Grant.
Oh, of course, the Equals,
The
Baby
Equals,
Come Back.
Baby Come Back. What a great and
One of the first reggae hits,
Yeah.
a giant song, a great example of a song that was worldwide
right.
smash,
barely
number one
barely
in many
cracked
countries.
the top 20 here, I believe. I don't even know if
Not even the top 30.
No,
but a great,
yeah,
great,
a great song. Even,
Absolutely.
Even the video that they were on one of those British shows. I mean, lip syncing and all. It just and of course Eddie. You know, then some 16, 20 years later, you know, had a monster hit with Electric Avenue. But yeah, no, just those are the kind of songs that you know that I'll hear on your show. Again, others will flow through my head. You know, it's terrific.
You know, sometimes you'll make a connection. Like I don't get too much into the trivia background. As you know, I try to leave that to the audience. Like in most cases, I won't even mention the artist of a song or the title because I figure, Google. You know, it's had like Marie Antoinette, the equivalent of Let 'Em Eat Cake. Let them Google. Let them figure out what the song is. But if something comes up that I find is interesting, like when I did the countdown on July 4th, I did the top 40 countdown, the last July 4th, which was the top songs that were hits on the 4th of July in both America and England, you know, Revolutionary War. And one of those songs was Moni Moni, Tommy James and the Shondells. another name I can't say. And I didn't know this when I was looking into some information. I didn't know who wrote that song. And he only had one hit of his own. And 2 years before he had that hit, he wrote Mony Mony. And I'll tell you the guy. I'll tell you the hit.
What was the other hit? Yeah.
Montego Bay. You remember the song?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's two versions. There's the 45 version, and then there's the one that ends
Oklahoma.
with the one that ends with the reciting the
Right.
Oh, what a beautiful morning, Mungo Jerry. No, not Mungo Jerry.
That's another one.
No, that's in the
even though they
summertime.
weren't. That's
Oh,
right.
give me his initials.
BB. It came out a few weeks after in the summertime in that same year, I think, 1970. Not that's going to help any. Unless you have the 45. I know it because I had the 45.
Is it Bobby something or other?
Bobby Bloom.
Bobby Bloom. I'm thinking Bobby Bland, Bobby Bear. Yeah, yeah. There
So
you go. Yeah.
silly
and
little.
he died
trivia.
shortly after
yes,
that.
he got taken way too early.
It's like another kind of obscure song that's great when you hear is B.W. Stevenson from
My
75,
Maria.
My Maria, which on the radio that I've been doing, I just played a new version
Brooks and Dunn?
by
There's a newer version than Brooks and Dunn. 'Cause Brooks and
Brooks
Dunn
and
had
Dunn's, yes.
They had a very big hit with it in the
yeah,
90s.
Yeah, and it basically, it updated it, but I didn't know that it brought anything new to the table. That's the thing that, because again, in your case, you can't get too overly critical, but it would be maybe a good idea, like to do a show where, I'll give you, for instance, my wife and I went to see the director's cut of Woodstock recently. Okay, and all of a sudden Joe Cocker gets up there, and I got to tell you, I mean, just you only hear one or two songs. He did like a whole 12-song set. Blows the crowd away when he sings "With a Little Help from My Friends." And we were having the conversation afterwards. Love the box top version, or no, that was The Letter. That was another example.
Right.
Love that song, but then Joe takes it to another stratosphere.
Absolutely.
Same thing with A Little Help from My Friend. Yeah, Ringo's kind of, song that, everybody knows Ringo. You hear Joe, and it's like, it's not even the same record.
You're absolutely right.
So I'm just saying that would be something I would love to see, where I don't even know what you would call it.
I don't either, because it's very opinionated, and that gets into, I think, a potentially dangerous area.
That's what I'm saying, why it probably wouldn't work.
I like playing songs that touch people's emotions, even in a way where it splits the crowd. And another example of that, if I may, on that same July 4th countdown that we did, one of the songs that came up that was a big hit in both America and England on that day was, I'm going to regret going there because I'm sure everybody has an opinion about this song, whether it's, I don't think anybody's neutral about it. Everybody either loves it or hates it. Richard Harris, MacArthur Park. 7 minutes
Well,
of either.
there's another one, okay? That version, I can tell you that anytime I hear it, and I can't say that I've heard it on your show, but I've heard it on other, quote, classic oldies or whatever, retro stations. And then, of course, about 10, 12 years later, Donna Summer did a very admirable version that someone must have thought, you know what, she can really whip something new into this.
Yeah,
So I
and she did.
I would count that as another example. The thing where I think you were going is that Richard's kind of majestic, for lack of a better word, as I remember it, it holds its own, but then she kind of turned it into just like this, straight disco song, and it had some frills to it, whatever. But certainly the other thing is just, it's like a command performance that Harris does.
Well, that's what I was saying, because what happened was one of the listeners posted on my Facebook telling me how much he loved the show, and he said, I loved it in spite of the fact that you played MacArthur Park, which of course opened up the floodgates, because people started posting saying, well, I love that song, and because people are very, and I think part of it is if you grew up with the song, if you remember when it came out, you know how it felt to hear it several times every day and stop everything for those 7 minutes.
The fact
because
that
it's
somebody
so
would
haunting.
listen to that, not just in length, but I mean, there are songs, and again, I can't come up with one that you hear it and then you say, I'll give you a bad example, a Hotel California, love the Eagles. Saw them back in '77, Hotel California. A young Jimmy Buffett opened. We thought, oh, this kid might have a future. Now, with the exception of a couple of songs like Heartache Tonight and maybe James Dean, whatever, I'm just played out. I can't listen to them anymore. So, it's a weird thing. Everybody has that reaction with certain bands or artists. But to go back to what you were saying was that, whether it's MacArthur Park or The Letter with A Little Help from My Friend, it's kind of like, I don't even know what you would call that segment. It would be like, did you know, or same song, two different interpretations.
Right. It's tough because it's also, it's risky to do two versions of the same song back to back. The same way it's risky to play two songs by the same artist back to back, even though I break that rule every now and then in the What's Going On hour. But because part of the other thing that I think makes this show hopefully work is its balance. Every segment we do is meant to be balanced musically. It's meant to represent all of the eras of the show, and both male and female vocalists, and rock as well as R&B, and maybe every now and then something that's a little unusual or something that you haven't heard in a while or something that people don't regard as being a big testing song. Because I'll throw in, if I can do it, and I think it shows up, we played it, I think, on one of the things that I was talking up, was Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas. Now that's a song, again, either you love or you hate. And I think some people probably who hated it back in the day probably like it now.
But it still has a life. I saw a sitcom a few years ago where they used it in a thing where they were going to do almost like a battle with a couple of kids with another couple of kids, and all of a sudden they didn't understand that, well, a brawl means a brawl, not like some sort of choreographed thing. So they bring out their little boombox, and all of a sudden they're playing Kung Fu Fighting, thinking it's going to be some precision artistry, and they get their butts kicked. But meanwhile, you're hearing that song for us all over again.
And it's also, again, if you want to split hairs, it's really ethnically incorrect, but it's a fun song.
Yeah, it is.
I think a lot of these songs, especially songs that I play, get a pass, get a free pass, even though lyrically, in many ways now, they are wrong for our times. And they sound, I think in many ways they sound dated, but the music is so good that they get that free pass.
But then there's also those today that would say that some of the music that's around today, the newer stuff from the 21st century, that sometimes the sensibilities, and some will maybe directed towards rap or towards I'm not even sure what the grunge music, whatever, that some of it crosses certain lines. So again, it depends.
I think it's one of those things where radio has to walk that line.
Yeah.
And we have now so many other options to listen to new music aside from radio. We have a whole generation now that knows the intention of a lot of pop songs, which may be incorrect or offensive, but they only know that offensiveness and incorrectness because they hear it on Spotify or are watching the video on YouTube. But it's radio's job to launder and get rid of all that stuff. Because when you hear a lot of these big hits today, there's a lot of censorship. When we were kids, we could count the number of times something was bleeped on the radio.
Well, or these
maybe there were 4 songs, I think, in our entire childhood.
Rich Girl by Hall and Oates.
And it wasn't even bleeped. They left that word
Yeah,
in.
they left it in some, but now today they whitewashed it, like Steve Miller, and I'm blanking on the thing.
Jet airliner.
A jet airliner.
Right.
And I
Funky
forget,
kicks going
and
down
the word
the
they
city.
substitute, which they did, I guess,
Right.
when they did the original recordings, is ridiculous. I can remember back in the day, in the few minutes we have, Billy Joel, Catholic Girls Start Much Too Late. Oh my goodness, like 1 a.m. station that I used to have friends with, that I unfortunately never got a chance to work at, exercise that
That's
entire
right.
line.
I have that version. I have a version that took those certain lines out. They cut out the rosary beads as well. Understood. But that was very rare in those days because the artists made songs for radio. Now that doesn't seem to matter much anymore. But we're really going off on a tangent.
Real quick.
we're running out of time.
Yes, we only have a
aren't we?
minute. They tell me the Chestnut Cabaret. That's when listeners listen to your show, that thing with Rich Appel. I always love the Chestnut Cabaret. Tell me in 30
that's
seconds
where-
where
that's
the
where we
idea
are.
for that moniker came from.
I stole it. Yeah. Did I tell you that story last time I was here? I didn't mean to steal it. It was a George Harrison, My Sweet Lord moment,
Yeah.
with He's So Fine. The first show I ever did, that very first show in December of 24, I'd already decided we're going to call it the Chestnut Cabaret. And the first time I mentioned it, someone comes on Facebook and says, "You don't remember the Chestnut Cabaret was a big club in Philadelphia? You went to school there." I said, "I totally forgot about that. I didn't even remember." Luckily, it's long gone.
There
It's
you
not
go.
there anymore.
It's an homage. It's an homage.
Well, it's an unintentional homage, but an homage nonetheless. And it's an excuse to say homage.
That thing with Rich Appel, syndicated radio show, over 100 stations. Before we blink an eye, it'll be on over 200 stations.
Let's hope.
Thatthingshow.com for more information. Rich, as always, a pleasure, and we're looking for you on one of our Christmas shows. Yeah, there's your invitation right there. Larry DeSilva, thanking you for joining us here on the most recent episode of Studio 411. I've got my little portable radio here. We're going to leave you with...
We're going to do this again?
Yeah, we're going to leave you with a few more clips of Rich doing his magic on That Thing with Rich Appel. Larry DeSilva, thanking you for tuning in. Take care.
That thing with Rich Appel.
Bell Labs, this week in 1948, introduced the transistor, without which this could never have been a summer classic. You'll hear how I put that in the proper perspective, because I don't know about you, but I was less likely to make love in the grass than listen to my transistor. Hey, where did we go?
The class reunion weekend, the Wow 100, the Slow Dance Makeout Song of the Week, What's Going On, the World's Shortest Countdown, the Top 100 of Top 100, bringing the fun back to radio. That Thing with Rich Appel.
Rich Appel.
You like it!
That thing with Rich Appel.
This is Rich Appel. Remember, the best thing you can ever be is yourself.
Take your records and get out of here!
Join me again 7 days from now.
Same bat time, same bat channel.